Hello, welcome to the Ageless Living Collaborative webinar series. Today, we're going to be tackling the labor issues facing today's senior living care. Thank you for joining us today. Ageless Living Collaborative is delighted to be bringing you the first panel of 2023. And we like to keep it topical and current, and there is nothing more topical than the labor issue facing senior living today. And so we have assembled a great group of folks who can maybe help you through some of the landmines, share some of their tricks, their concerns, maybe talk about some things that you've never thought about. We're really excited about this particular webinar. I encourage everybody who has a question to please post it in the Q&A. And once we see there's an open question, we will take that question during the webinar. We will not hold them till the end. So please, if you think of something you'd like to ask, make sure that you put it into the Q&A and we'll go ahead and answer it live, okay? I am Phoebe Stein. I'm your moderator today. I am co-founder with David Ashen of the Ageless Living Collaborative and president of Olive Presents, a branding and marketing firm. And I am going to introduce our panel. The Hollywood Squares starts with the lower portion of our screen, Greg Sinney, who is the culture creator and president and owner of Kemper House and Our Home. He is out of Central Ohio and is dealing with labor issues and hiring issues right now. So it will be interesting to get his perspective as he is in the hot seat. Kevin Hefner comes to us from Lifespan Network, where he is CEO. He has lots of interesting thinking. Our lead into the session was absolutely exhilarating, and I hadn't thought of all the things that he was bringing to the table, so I'm excited for everybody to hear from him. And then we have Jessica Spurgeon, who is Director of Talent Acquisition for Lutheran Senior Services out of St. Louis. Jessica is also a member of the Ageless Living Collaborative Advisory, and she has lots to say about hiring since she does it 24/7. And in the upper corner, we have Rachel Rangelove. Rachel is the Executive Vice President of Design and Construction at Longview Senior Housing. She is on the board of directors of the Ageless Living Collaborative. And that is our panel. I want to get started now by talking about the state of staffing in senior care today. And I think a good place to start, we always need to know where you're coming from before you talk about where you are and where you're going. So Kevin, I'd like you to kind of give us a little bit of history of 10 to 20 years ago. What was the landscape and what are the significant trends you're seeing today?
Well, thanks, Phoebe. I always like to tell a story from several years ago when our association moved its headquarters, and is often the case when you move, we found some old things, and we found a member survey. It was an actual printed member survey from 1989 in which we asked the proverbial question, what keeps you awake at night of all of our members? And the answer in this book was staffing. So fast forward almost 35 years later, and I would make the argument that not only are we still dealing with the same kinds of challenges, very different, very nuanced in some regard, but that it's been exacerbated by COVID and by some of the market factors that have emerged since COVID. So very challenging time, but certainly at the top of everyone's list is how to fill those slots and to have a vibrant workforce.
So hopefully we're going to be able to give people an idea of how to make that happen, right? Because we've heard a lot of language that is not necessarily something that anybody can get their arms around, like, quiet firing, quiet hiring, the great departure. Jessica, you brought a new word to my lexicon the other day when you said that there was a sandsdemic going on. I thought, what in the world is a sandsdemic? The pandemic was bad enough. So can you tell us, what's that?
Sure. Phoebe, thank you for allowing me to jump on and join with your panel here. And I'll start off by saying I have a pretty hard passion around this particular topic, but first and foremost, I have a theory about staffing, particularly in 2023. And that theory is that senior living does not have a staffing crisis. Senior living has a culture crisis.
Mm.
And our problem began long before the pandemic. Kevin spoke very highly that 30, 35 years ago, this was the conversation everyone was having. When my mother was a CNA 20 years ago, after getting laid off from her union job, that was the conversation she had every day, was we don't have enough people to care for our residents. And so our industry has this mindset that, we're victims to this, that this is an insurmountable, problem that we're facing. And what very often is occurring is that we don't want to look at the environment of what's going on in our buildings. And our companies are really defined by the worst behavior that any leader in your organization is willing to tolerate. So first and foremost, I'll say culture really is what people need to focus on. I hear from leaders, we give bonuses, we change hours, we are flexible, we do all these things. But if you don't know what you're tolerating, there's a high probability that you won't retain good people. So that's number one. But as far as just sheer numbers of people, that's always the big question, right? We can't necessarily ignore that there's countless jobs out there, and we can't find enough people to fill the roles that we have. So there's a few big key driving forces behind this. So in 2022, 59 million people had gig jobs, right?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
In 2027, the estimations for this is that we will be at 85 million, which for those of us looking for direct hires, that is terrifying.
It's not good news.
Not good news, right? 5 million people started new businesses in 2021,
Mm-hmm.
which was up 25% from the year prior. And then you combine that with baby boomers leaving the workforce, 3 million left 2 years ago. And birth rates have declined. We talked about, it was around 3 in the mid 70s per American family. Now we're looking at less than 2. So there's just frankly not enough people. But the big thing really that we as an organization here, and then also just around senior living in general, culture is going to be what saves us. You've got to keep the good people.
Right. Well, that makes sense in every industry, frankly. I know that when it comes to senior living, though, you're speaking Rachel's language, because Rachel is always talking about how culture impacts every facet of senior living. So, I'm going to let you guys get into the culture conversation too. And so we'll come back to that. But, I think that there are some other elements that are playing in to this shortage, this challenge, rising labor costs. They're just they're through the roof. And so now we have minimums, which are good for the workers, maybe not as good for the employers as in the past. Maybe they were able to get labor for a little bit less money. They had some different pockets to go to. Greg, how are you managing this right now? And I know you've got some new properties that you just brought on board, and so you are really flooded with need, but are you flooded with prospects?
So I've gotten to peek behind the curtain as to how other companies operate, how other companies pay. And the thing that I found most interesting, and I'll use an example. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'll use an example that, so I am all about quality of food, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And staffing. And so we're very much farm to table, fresh made, no preservatives, no additives, no processed ingredients. So it takes a lot of labor, prep labor to do cooking in our communities. What I found is our average person that works in our kitchen makes anywhere from $15 to $17. and they're happy as larks. They work so hard. So I'm culture curator. That's my most important thing that I do for my communities, is create culture that attracts the right-hearted people. So I was shocked to see that the communities that I acquired, they were paying the same people $25 an hour that I was paying $16 to $17 an hour. And we weren't getting the quality out of them that we were getting in the communities that I was paying less in. And I think that really attributes to, as Jessica says, culture. And I think, one of the things that we do is my culture is built on family, compassion, and love. And there's power in that. And I live that and I breathe that. And I think it makes a tremendous difference. And so I think one way to control cost is by building a culture that actually attracts the right people that will actually work, because it's the right life balance, the right mission, and gives them purpose in their life. And they're willing to take a little bit less on that. And it was just kind of shocking to me, because I expected such different, and I've been able to see and I think companies tend to put restrictions on what leaders within, boots on the ground can do in how they hire, how they train, how they create culture. And I think some of those are the limitations to it. But I mean, I am just sold that if you create a purposeful culture, and then you enlist the people that you have that are like-minded to go out and bring in other like-minded and like-hearted people, they will come in and they will work for, I'm not saying we're going to undercut the market. We're going to pay them fairly for the work that they do. I think most organizations right now are kind of operating in fear. So they're like, oh, I'm just going to pay whatever to get that person in place, even if it's not the right fit. And they're overpaying for that. Instead of holding to a standard, we have kind of 3 traits that we look for in our staff, and we hold to those traits. And if you don't meet those traits, we do not hire you. And even if we feel like we're a little bit understaffed, I know that one good fit person will outwork 3 bad fit. And so I think some of those are the ways that we control it. And it really comes down to culture. And if you define that well, and then you hire to that, and you never let anything else deviate from that hiring practice, you can actually start controlling your labor costs as well as your culture and care. And it just trickles down. And at the end of the day, the beneficiary is the resident in living their best life.
So do you think that in turn makes you become an employer of choice in your marketplace?
100%. So I have a waiting list of people wanting to get in my community that I've created the culture. It's taken me 3 years to really create a strong culture there. Here, they use I gotta not speak too loud. They use 300 hours in agency each week. And so I'm going to replace that. And I will have that taken care of within the first 3 months. Because at the end of the day, agency doesn't understand your culture. They don't understand your residents. They don't understand process, procedures, and it actually makes it more difficult on the full-time employee that does understand all their, and they're working extra and probably getting paid less. And so, and it's costing me more. So half the production,
there's an impact to the residents. If you've got somebody
it's
constantly,
huge.
as opposed to somebody, circulating through a different person, every other week, the residents see the difference as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. So
Jess, you are also in that position coming from an operator, and you need to make sure that you guys are the employer of choice for your big network. So is culture playing the bigger piece for you as well? Or are you seeing something different in that equation?
I think culture is sort of embedded in the DNA of everything that you do if you're good at your job. And I think when I think about our work in TA, I look at it as it takes a village to recruit and a village to retain.
Mhm, mhm.
And so when I look at what my team does in TA, and, you know, for us, improving the candidate experience is really crucial. So, how are our systems set up to be highly automated? How do we utilize our social media channels to show that we're a great place to work? How do we ensure that our brand messaging is consistent with our values, with our beliefs, with our mission, with our core as a business? Greg mentioned, we've got 3 things we hire to, and we hold those steady.
Mhm.
And then also just, how we keep folks engaged and making sure that we offer the best possible benefits to keep people coming in, because money isn't going to do it. So I do definitely think automation is key in every aspect of that. And then also just the relationship. I think the employee experience, once they're in the door, keeping to your promise, right? Everything that you sold them on, you're holding that line. The one thing that we've talked a lot about is, I'm deviating a little bit here, Phoebe, so forgive me, but this industry can be one that I think isn't always known for being the most kind to their staff, right? So a lot of times our leaders are known for eating their young. And so we need to create a culture of kindness, and a culture of appreciation.
Mhm.
One of these great seminars that I went to just recently with Leading Age, there was a chief retention officer, and she talked about, that we have folks that work within our space that lead lives none of us will ever understand. And if you have an employee that shows up 10 minutes late to work, and she has this big long story as to why she showed up, your first response should be, thank you for coming to work to take care of the residents. Not, I can't believe you're late to work.
Right.
So the human element is the other piece to it. But was there anything else technology wise, Phoebe? Was there anything with process you were wanting me to cover?
No, not right yet. No. But I think when we talk about culture and getting the right people, the right fit for what your key principles are,
Mhm.
we also have to, okay, you've gotten them in the door, as you said,
Yeah.
making sure that it's not bait and switch for the employee is critical. And so, Kevin, would you kind of talk us through some of the retention strategies that you are seeing that are working, that aren't working? And I think that might be the other side of the equation here.
Sure. I think, everything that Greg and Jessica had to say is right on target. It's, about creating the culture that makes people who are working there feel valued, feel wanted, feel appreciated. I was thinking the other day about how many people will drive past 3 coffee shops to get to Starbucks, right? That's about culture. You are bought in to that particular experience. They've created a culture for customers. Well, in a like fashion, we need to create a culture for our employees where they will drive past 3 other opportunities because they want to work for us. They want to be part of what we're doing. They want to be engaged in enriching older people's lives in the way that we have, sort of set that stage for them. So I think some of the more creative provider members that we have, they walk that walk every day, and they have long-term tenured employees who, are there 10, 20 years. And the reason that they're there is because, number one, they have to be committed to older people. Everybody has that story about a relationship with a grandparent, a relationship with an older person down the street. That's the hook that gets most of the people who stay in this field into it, is that sense of connection to older people. But in order to keep them there, we need to do the best that we can to remove the barriers that exist. And I always talk about, there are some barriers that are artificial and self-imposed that we can get rid of. There are others that are more embedded, more challenging. And you know, Jessica was talking about people arriving to work late. We need to really understand what their challenges are and the issues that they face, and come alongside them and help them to get past those. And the most successful members, operators that we hear, you know, the anecdotes from, are the ones who are truly committed to those employees, committed to their lives, want to truly know about what makes them tick, want to know about their families. And when they can't make it to work on time, or they can't make it to work at all, they want to know why, and can create support systems to help them get there. You know, it doesn't have to be a big infrastructure, but you know, if you're willing to commit to supporting people who have challenges getting to work every day, they will recognize that, and they will reward you for it.
Well, do you think, and Rachel, I'm going to ask you, do you think that that's different in senior living than, say, for a workforce that's working at a big box store like a Target or a Walmart? You know, do you think that the folks who are working at Target or Walmart, even though they have these iconic brands, right? So, you know, we can talk about the fact that, okay, the brand means one thing, but culturally, do you think that those guys, if they're late for work, that there's somebody who cares and asks, you know, or thanks them for coming in? And so, or do you think that's really special to senior living? I'm thinking it's special to senior living, but I'd like to know.
Well, I would argue that I think a lot of people are paying more attention to that now because everybody's having issues retaining people. And I think this recruiting piece of it's great, but the retaining piece is even better because you can't sustain culture if your door is revolving. And so, you know, I've never worked at Target, so I can't say this for sure. But if I'm the leader of a company and I want to retain people and I'm not thinking about culture and not thinking about what that means, I'm probably not doing my job. And, you know, I want to say that this is a really hard problem. It's the worst problem to have. If you ask anybody who's been in senior living for a long time, what is the worst problem to have in your communities? A bad culture is the worst problem that you can have because it takes time to work through that culture. When you have people who are in a poor mindset, maybe they've been mistreated, they're doing a job, they're just bodies in a chair. It's a monumental lift to take people who are there and shift them to a positive mindset. You can fix the physical plant. You know, we talk about these things all of the time. You can do a great marketing campaign. These are things that, while they take effort, they're by far less difficult than shifting a culture. And so I think, from my perspective, having seen many people in my career say that they have culture, and you end up in a building and you see within 5 minutes that they don't, because the first person who greets you at the front desk is rude. I mean, these things show up immediately when you're in a property if you haven't gotten it right, and it affects everybody, and it certainly affects the bottom line. It affects our residents. I mean, we could have a whole week-long discussion about culture, how to build it, how to save it. And, you know, I think the larger companies, that's really where I've seen this struggle. So, you know, I love hearing Greg speak because he's in this great place of, like, his heart is in it. I think what I've seen is as companies grow, they get farther and farther away from the people that work in their communities. And this is not, I'm not saying that this is done intentionally. It's just sort of the downside of growing. And so then there has to be this commitment to drive culture from the top all the way down, and it has to be done consistently with the same messaging and the same intent. And then at a local level, whoever sits in the chair, who's the executive director or whatever position you call them, they also have to be committed to that. And unless all of those things are working, I really think that in senior housing, we're more hands-on, and so it's really critical. But I would argue in any business that customer service is important. Culture is also important.
I think we can all agree on that. I think this is the culture club. it's important in every business. I still find it lacking in so many. And I think that you hit on the fact that that's exactly what is lacking, because when you walk into a place and you have disenfranchised employees, everybody feels it. The customer feels it, or the resident feels it. And that's the missing ingredient. Kevin, what strategies are senior care providers employing in order to attract direct care workers?
Sure. So, we've, during the pandemic, many of us had time to think creatively about how to improve things. And so one of the things that has existed in our state, Maryland, is an environment where you have to take a second exam in order to be a GNA to work in a nursing home. Typically, take the CNA exam to work in assisted living, hospitals, home care. And I talked a little bit earlier about artificial barriers to entry. Part of what we've been working with our members on is trying to eliminate some of those artificial barriers. So Maryland's in the process of, we believe, eliminating the GNA requirements. So for nursing homes, it'll make it easier for people to enter that space. But there are other barriers that exist as well. I used the Starbucks example earlier. What causes people to drive past 3 coffee shops on their way to Starbucks? Well, we should be asking ourselves the question, what will cause this limited pool of workers, potential workers, to drive past 3 retirement communities or 3 assisted living facilities or 3 nursing homes because they want to work for us? We're competing with ourselves, just like we're competing with the external marketplace. And so removing barriers, I think, Phoebe, is a big part of what we've been trying to do collectively. I mentioned the certification, but also in order to get into this space, as you know, you have to take an exam. You have to go through a certification course to be a direct care worker. Well, typically at a Starbucks, at a Walmart, at a Target, you are paid to be trained from the first day that you walk in and are hired as an employee. Now there are ways to that in certain states, depending on the certification process, that you can do that. Certainly during the pandemic, there were temporary nursing assistants that were allowed to work. But I think, let's start with the simple things. Let's eliminate the barriers that exist to getting into the space. These are real barriers. One of them is, as I mentioned, GNA in Maryland. Another is having to be certified and to spend $1,000 or $1,200 for a certification course before you go to work. Well, think about how difficult it might be for any of us to spend $1,000 or $1,200 before earning a paycheck. Think about, the typical direct care worker and how hard it is to be able to afford to do that. Even if you're willing to drive past Starbucks and Walmart and Target, if we then say, well, congratulations, you're committed to our cause, here's a bill for $1,200 before you can start earning a paycheck, that's a challenge. That's a problem. So we've been working in the collective about to find ways to eliminate those barriers. So the ones that I've just mentioned, but also what about the local community college only offers certification courses during the day? You have childcare challenges, or you have another job that you're working that takes place during the day. Well, how do you do that? Well, so we've introduced the first hybrid asynchronous certification program in Maryland to get around some of those things. So people can take the course, and we want others to do it too. We have no proprietary pride in this. If we could get 10 of these set up around our state, we would. But the whole idea is if your schedule will only allow you to do that third shift time frame for the taking the course, you can log on and you can do it then. So it's just creative ways, Phoebe, of trying to eliminate the traditional barriers that exist to getting into the marketplace so that we can compete with those companies that I mentioned on a more level playing field. We don't control the certification process necessarily, but there are things that we can do if we think creatively about what are the barriers that exist to somebody getting into our field, and why might they work at that Walmart, or why might they work at that Target instead of working for us? They care about older people. They're predisposed to do that, but we've made it difficult for them. And so they're going to go elsewhere if it becomes too frustrating. So those are the things that I think we all need to be thinking about, is how do we remove those barriers so that people can more easily get into the field.
I can speak here for LSS. In the past, we have done CNA programs and partnerships with academic institutions locally. So they'll bring CNAs to our site, and then they can get some of those hours and experience, boots on the ground while they wrap up their certification. And we also, many of these schools partner with government programs to provide grants for these students. And then in some instances, we've provided some funding directly back. We also have a dedicated CNA program that any employee can start with LSS and get that covered at, as part of their tenure with the organization. So if they have a desire to serve our seniors in that capacity, we will cover that as long as they remain an employee for a period of time after they receive the certification.
That makes perfect sense. Well, there you go. There's one way to remove some barriers and encourage loyalty as well. That's a wonderful culture piece. It's a nice benefit, if you will, for people. Rachel, you said something to me when we were talking about this session about refugee programs, and I thought that was really curious and interesting. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think it's being done, or there's a lot of interest in it in the hospitality industry. And I know that Blackstone has been doing that for some of their hotels with some pretty good success. Our Canadian operator started doing it because they have a concentrated market. So they have 10 properties within a tight range. And so they were able, and it's French speaking areas, so they were able to bring refugees from French speaking countries and start to create community, offer, they have to already have refugee status. So they aren't actually creating this approval for refugee status, but they do provide housing and training. There is a commitment again there. And the hope is that even beyond that, people will set down roots, they'll create a sense of community, and that will give them purpose and meaning, and that they will continue to stay. I think they have brought in, this is going to sound like a small number, but 50 people. And that's actually a lot of people to coordinate. And so it's just the beginning. I'm a huge fan of this because I think it's a win-win situation. And this is something I think we can't forget. Whenever someone takes a job, we have to be wondering what's in it for them. And the answer is not just money. It has to be something else. It's a little bit easier in a refugee situation. They're getting safety. They're getting the opportunity to build a new life somewhere else. I mean, these things are very apparent, the benefits to the person entering into the program. But we should be asking the same questions here of our people. What's in it for them when they come to work every day? Just a little side note on that.
I think that the refugee opportunity is a big one. And as Jess was talking about, we have less people, we have
Greg, this might be a good thing for you because you've got properties in one-ish markets.
Right.
There we go.
Yeah, I can tag on to that a little bit if you want me to. So one of the things we do is we have a high population of African workers in a couple of our communities. And I work closely with them it's amazing the sacrifice that people will make, leaving their family, leaving their kids, leaving their wife or husband behind to come to the United States for the opportunity to create a new life for their family. And they'll work for years. I had an employee that was away from his family for 11 years. Before he could get his 4 kids and his wife over. And I helped him. I met with attorneys, got him in touch with the right people to get his family over. And now I actually employ his wife and one of his sons. And there's so much, and you talk about loyalty. And right now, I just got, I helped, so his sister was working in our kitchen. He had to escape Africa because there's a lot of warring factions over there. Take a slow boat to South America, came up through South America, ended in Texas, was detained in Texas, and I helped get him out of detainment up to Kemper House, his work visa, employed at Kemper House, and then he just got his family on Monday to the US. And so I'm working on getting his wife a work visa so she can start working in our kitchen. You do that kind of stuff for people, that loyalty is tremendous. And that's a serious refugee program right there. And I think it's hard work, and it's maybe going above and beyond, but it makes a difference. And people talk about it within your community. Can you believe how they did this and how they did that? That's living the life of a culture that's built on family, right? And taking care of your kids wherever they are in the world. So I would just say, take that extra effort, get to know people, help them to do extraordinary things, to get their family safe, to get into a work environment that has a culture that they can flourish in, and good things really happen.
I know, Kevin, we had some conversation about your work with the governor's office and some statewide initiatives and partnerships that you all are doing in Maryland. I'd love for you to share some of that as well.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Stevie. So we, in thinking about the challenge, decided to approach it on both a micro and a macro level. In the micro fashion, we're recruiting classes that are comprised mostly of, as Jessica was saying, existing employees of our member organizations. And we're able to make a little bit of an impact there. Those are, primarily they were in dining services or in housekeeping or another area and decided they wanted to go into nursing. And so the provider is putting them through. On a macro level, we thought much bigger, how can we create a big impact across the state? And so we assembled a group of organizations that that all have an interest in helping to mitigate some of the challenges associated with recruitment and retention. So we have a relationship with the Dwyer Foundation, which is a foundation that has been set up in Maryland for the sole purpose of supporting retention efforts with direct care workers and senior living, very specific goals for the foundation. The CFG Bank Foundation, which can do some different things and also has some interest in the recruiting side. And then, as you mentioned, I'm part of the Governor's Workforce Development Board, which is within the Department of Labor, the entity that interacts with unemployed Marylanders and helps to get them into employment situations. So we brought all of those groups together and sort of talked about, what can you do? What can I do? What can they do? And everybody had a role. But the piece that we were missing, because we had big dreams about, how do we get recruiters that we hire full-time to go out into high schools and really sell the vision of becoming interested in the field. I believe, high school students, there are some that are going to go to four-year university, there are some that are going to go into the military, and then there's a large third group that's not sure what they want to do, but they're not going to go to college. They don't want to join the Army. If we can paint that vision for them through college and career fairs, of not only just getting into the field, but also a career ladder that has promise. That's a noble profession, a challenging but exciting thing to do, that will have some success there. So, but as you know, with high school students, you've got maybe 10 seconds, 15, if we're being generous for those of us who have teenagers, and you need to deliver on that that very quickly. So we had through some other relationships developed a connection to Mike Rowe, you might be familiar with from Dirty Jobs, the television show, but he's obviously very focused on apprenticeships and jobs that don't require college, and talked with Mike about whether he'd be interested in being the face of our promotion, of our recruitment efforts. And he said yes. So, our hope is, as this collaborative continues to talk, that, we'll have some new initiatives on retention through the Dwyer Foundation. We'll have some that support all Marylanders in the field. We'll have some initiatives that help to, for instance, get iPads into people's hands who might want to do the hybrid certification program, but don't have a computer at home. And then working with the governor's office and the Department of Labor on pushing out these opportunities to unemployed Marylanders, doing some career fairs in urban settings. So we have big goals and ideas, but we recognize that we're in a very, very competitive marketplace with some other very sophisticated industries. And if we are going to be successful, we need to do some things that will grab the attention of people, hopefully at a younger age, at a high school age, who might want to get into the field, but then also maybe people who have been displaced through COVID. They were in hospitality positions, in restaurants and hotels. They lost their job, but they still have that service, the servant's heart. They want to be in a field that serves people. And so we want to capture them too. So maybe through that multi-pronged approach of doing career fairs for people who have been displaced or are looking for a job, and then going directly into high schools to paint that vision for some younger people who haven't made career decisions, that will be able to make some impact. But we recognize it's going to be a long path, and we need to keep trying to roll that rock up the hill.
I love your parallel between hospitality and senior living, because both industries are of service and they really are more intertwined than not. We've seen this in many facets of the industries kind of running parallel, from design to service. And I think that's wise. I do know that in hospitality, though, now they're giving a lot of money to get those folks back. So there might be a little competition there. But speaking about the design for a second, I want to talk about that too, because there are ways that design can ease some of the pressures that operators are feeling from a staffing perspective. Rachel, can you shed some light on that?
I think it starts with the simple things, like make sure you have the right furniture so that people can get up out of chairs without assistance, right? So those sound like small things, and they are, but they're most often done improperly. And so you've now done two things. You've created a situation where someone needs help. So that's a staffing issue. And you've also made somebody feel like they can no longer do for themselves. So those things are really critical. And then you go from there and you say, well, when you design an apartment, what kinds of things can you put into that apartment that helps that person? How is the kitchen set up? Do you have grab bars in the bathroom, whether you need them or not? Because they aren't actually required everywhere, but they should be. So what are you doing in that way so that people can do for themselves longer? I mean, the payback on that is a little bit, I guess you can measure it over time when you're doing it right. So those are the small things. And then you can layer in technology and those kinds of things, which I think our industry has been somewhat slow to do. I hope that we're gonna have to start thinking about that. Anything from the fall protection type of systems that we've been looking at, and there are others to speak to that more than I, up to the robots that we're using in dining rooms to clear tables. So there's that piece of technology. And then on a larger scale, it's how do we set up our communities? How do we build our common space? We still need to be able to offer good products to our consumer. Our consumers want choice. It's really hard to provide choice in things like dining when you don't have any servers. So can you create more grab and go functions that people can use that have really great food and that changes consistently? Can you create markets that are line of sight to the front desk so that as long as someone is there, people can get a salad or a roll of toilet paper or whatever it is that they need? I actually hate it when they put toilet paper in the market, but it's a necessity. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. And then just thinking smart about central kitchens, like how do we design our kitchens such that we can serve food efficiently? This is going to be more and more important because our problem is not going away. And so these days of these sprawling communities where you have things at multiple ends of the building, I mean, this is just absolutely impossible to staff right now. And so it's really high on my list, because I refuse to give up on some of these things that we want to do and the services that we want to provide our residents. So I think as a design community, we are challenged to sit down and think about how we can assist operators and bring our skill set to them to help them do a better job with less people. I think that's the reality.
Agreed. And I love the robots. But I think that anytime you can feel independent and anytime you don't need to have people help you in and out of a chair or to the bathroom, maybe this is where the high school students start, right? This is where they come in and they learn the ropes and realize how rewarding it can be to help somebody and not make them feel dependent, but actually encourage their independence. Can you think of any other design areas that help in making a property run smoothly? Greg, can you think of any?
Sure can. I married my high school sweetheart and she's an interior designer. So I kind of have breathed and lived and walked that out the last 32 years of my life. And Rachel actually designed the building that I'm sitting in right now. And I can use that as an example. Every aspect of your building is sending a message. So as soon as somebody casts eyes on your building, they start recognizing the lawn, the landscape, the entrance, the mats going into the entrance, the foyer, the furniture. All that stuff is telling a message, either if you're a potential resident, a potential family member, or an employee. And all of those details are speaking to them. And the more in sync you have all of that stuff speaking the same message of excellence, the more likelihood is by the time they reach that front desk, they'll have a good feeling about that community. And so I'm kind of like, and it's probably an inappropriate word to use, but I'm like the furniture Nazi. I walk around my community and I straighten things, I straighten accessories, like little things make a difference. We take care of the big things, no matter what, those are going to be taken care of. It's the little things that speak the loudest. And coming into the community that I'm in right now that Rachel designed, it really felt right. And there's often you can't tell why it feels right. It's just everything kind of fits in place. Colors, the scale, the furniture, and it tells a story. And I can just tell you that when it's designed right, it helps the resident live more independently, and it's your best marketing tool. You should be able to kind of just let anybody walk somebody through your building, and their engagement of the staff with the residents and the environment itself will sell it. So it doesn't take an expert to sell people on either working there or living there. So the environment is a big deal.
Jess, do you have an environmental design focused story you can share with us?
That's a really great question, and I'm far from being an expert in this space. I do know that Rachel's mentioning of robotics in our industry is definitely something that we've looked at. We have one community that has Servi set up that helps remove just plates from our dining space. And but I think just as a whole, those of us that are looking at development of properties, looking at execution of layouts and furniture needs for their residents are definitely ahead of the curve. And the competition, I'm not sure about everyone on this call, but we have sites where you can drive just within a few miles and see countless life plan communities. And so for many of us, as we've done redesigns and repositions, that's been a big forefront for us, has been looking at design that is best suited for those that are looking for choice in senior care.
Kevin, how about you? Maryland's so innovative on things. I want to hear your perspective on how design helps in this labor issue and also in attracting, workers and residents.
Yeah, I think, people, as Greg was saying, and just as well, people form first impressions. When they walk in, before they even set foot in your building, they've made some assessments. And as you said correctly, Phoebe, it's not just prospective residents or employees. It's the whole ball of wax. It's families, prospective families, prospective residents. And there is a place in Bethesda, just outside of Washington, D.C., where I can stand on the corner and I can see 3 very large brand assisted living buildings just by turning around in a circle. All of them are located there because they've done the homework and know that they'll be successful there if they have a product that attracts people. But I think certainly Bill Thomas has had a big impact on the way that we look at the way we design our spaces. You could go all the way back to the Eden alternative with the concept of having, as Bill says, wanting to, if I need to be in a health care setting, I'd rather feel like I was in a garden than in a hospital. And so having pets, having plants is attractive to people, not just prospective families and residents, but prospective employees. But then we're also all familiar with the small house model and, wanting to do things that will engage people. It's not just the residents that I think are best served when there is a hearth and a large kitchen area or food service area. I think it's the employees as well. So if spaces are designed so that the real action is happening in the center of the space where people are gathering, they're encouraged to be together. We're all social beings, and for the people who are thinking about working in this space, they'll make choices based upon where they feel comfortable, where they feel like it is a home that they could envision themselves being in if they weren't a resident or if they weren't an employee, but maybe a resident at some future date. So I think designing spaces that attract people together, using those tools is a smart thing to do.
I would add to that the neighborhood. And I say that because the employees go to the building every day and you hope that they are enjoying that experience. The residents are there every day, but the neighbors walk by every day. And in my neighborhood, we have a lovely IL and AL community that we walk by on the way to the park every day. And there is one man who works at the community who says hello to my dog every day. And he has little dog biscuits in his pocket. And that says a lot to a dog lover, right? That says, okay, that's a really cool guy, but it doesn't stop there. Because we were walking by one day and a woman came out and said, would you mind bringing your dog inside? I have a couple of residents who would love to pet him. Of course, we'd be delighted. But it was that whole community. It was all of the employees who were looking for a way to make the residents happy. They were having joy in this. My dog thought he was the king of the world. So I think it extends to the neighborhood too. I think those right hires that right culture, all those pieces coming together for the right environment for the residents and for the neighborhood. I think we're out of time, you guys. It has been an amazing and very fast hour. We apparently answered a lot of questions for people because they did not pose any. But for anybody who has enjoyed the webinar and would like to get a few extra details or share it with somebody, we will have this webinar on the agelesslivingcollaborative.org website, and it'll probably be up next week. We also have a YouTube channel for Ageless Living Collaborative. And if you want to know what's happening with the Ageless Living Collaborative and are interested in future webinars or live events, please do follow us on Instagram or on LinkedIn or even Facebook, and you will be kept apprised of what we're doing, where we'll be, and what we'll be talking about. Thank you so much to the panel today, Rachel, Jess, Kevin, and Greg. It's been a great hour. Thank you for all of your contributions, and we'll look forward to seeing you again on a panel right here. Take care, everyone.